All right, thank you. So yes, casually hardcore. There's casual games, there's hardcore games, but in my opinion, kind of the borders between those two are fading. And I want to dive a little bit first into the history of games and how these terms came to be, and what I think the future will bring. But first of all, in the beginning, there was Pong, and it was very casual. Or maybe it was actually very hardcore. I mean, this is hard PvP action with really harsh fail conditions and permadeath. I thought it was very hardcore. So I want to dive a little bit into the history lesson, discover where popular terms of the history lost relevance and how they came to be. And I'm going to clear off some cobwebs and challenge what we established throughout the last decades. Right. So first of all, a little bit more about me. So my name is Martine, and I've been in the industry for about 10 or 11 years. First, I worked on Flash games when it was all online, and then 6 years ago, I started my own company, Tamalaki Games. We focus on puzzle games, hidden object, match 3, and we've had over the years more than 100 releases. And I do that in cooperation with my partner company, FGL. And these are a few of the game characters that we work with, and since our audience is are mainly women, that's why our female characters in the games are also mainly women. Come on, yes. So this was published last February. Don't call me a gamer, say mobile gamers. Just to highlight a few things of this. There's a study by AppLovin, and they found that 67% of respondents play mobile games 3 to 4 times per week, but would not consider themselves a gamer. This sentiment is more prevalent amongst female players. Shocking. Well, not really, because we already knew this, right? We already know this when we just look around in their own sort of family or our friends, who then play Candy Crush lots and lots of times, and then they say oh, but I'm not a gamer. Older generations are much as likely to call themselves a gamer. And 33% of adults age 55 and over play mobile games, and yet 85% of them shy away from the term gamer. So there's definitely a gender gap, also age gap, with sort of the younger generation who more easily identify with that term gaming. And I was wondering, how did this come to be? What happened in sort of the recent history of gaming, digital gaming, I should say, why these stereotypes sort of came to be? So I want to look a bit at the 70s when the gaming industry sort of started. When you look at the advertising for gaming in the 70s, it was kind of, gender neutral, unisex. There's this happy couple playing Odyssey 2 here. We make staying home fun, ha ha ha. And there's nothing sexist about it. Also with the game graphics from that, it was just pixels like Space Invaders and Pac-Man and stuff. So it really wasn't. So it hardly could be. The problem is just that this industry of gaming in the 70s, early 80s was booming. And when an industry booms, there's also a big flow of crap that comes along with it. So in the early 80s, a lot of really bad and buggy games were released. As a result of that, the consumer kind of lost faith in the medium of digital gaming, and they stopped buying consoles and they stopped buying games. And in 1983, this actually sort of caused a big gaming crash. So after that, the gaming industry sort of had to gather itself again and sort of be more smart about their business and their marketing. And they looked at the market and they said, well, it seems that slightly more men than women buy games and gaming consoles. So maybe we should think smart about our product and our marketing and aim more at them. So that's when these kind of ads came to be. It's kind of some big shooter game on the Sega Saturn. And it's clearly this ad is just not targeted at women who might enjoy a nice shooter as well, but the ad is just clearly not speaking to them. So that's basically how you have the market right there, and the big part of this pie is men. So you cut that out, you make it bigger, and you sort of scare away the women, and all of a sudden you're not talking anymore about a Famicom, but about a Game Boy. So, well, that was the 80s. But then we moved, kind of moving on to kind of nowadays and making that bridge between the gaming industry nowadays and then what do we like to play? What do women like to play? So this study is a little bit old. It's from 2017. It's from Polygon. I did find more recent ones who backed this up, but this had the most pretty visual that I could easily steal. So yeah, clear winners here are Match 3 and sort of farming sim and atmospheric explorations and things. I think a lot of people look at this sort of go nodding, like, yeah, no, I recognize that. It's sort of across the border, across the app stores. So keeping this in mind, yes. Are these games something new, right? These genres that were just like in the top. Is it something new? Well, let's go back to the 90s and look at a game like Monkey Island, like the point and click that was also very high in the graph. That was enjoyed a lot by a lot of men and women. It was very different from point and click adventures that came before that, because with Monkey Island there was not like a very, very heavy penalty if you did something wrong. You wouldn't instantly die and go back to start like in Oregon Trail. So that was like something new. And then in '93, there was Myst, which was even more about just atmospherical exploration without any penalties, without any pressure. And when it came out, it instantly became the best-selling game to that date, only to be smashed by The Sims in 2000, which, again, no hard penalties, quite relaxed gameplay, a little bit of sandbox, do as you like. And the audience of this franchise varies widely, but it was also one of the first games who sort of openly targeted more teenage girls, which, a game that was not pink for this audience. And of course, in 2006, Nintendo completely shook it up by removing that problem that people who were not used to holding a controller or didn't have previous game experience felt like they didn't belong, because they just completely changed everything. And they focused more on the experience of gaming than really on evolving the content itself. They evolved the machine that was played on. And at the same time, there was a big online boom of games, with like Bejeweled, Bookworm, Mahjong, and those kind of casual games because of the bigger penetration of good internet connections. These could flourish, and actually, like there was like a big rise in downloads on platforms that supported this. The backlash during this time, as I noticed, because that was also the time when I really started working professionally in the games industry, the backlash here was people would say like, oh, but something like Bookworm, that's not really a game. But then again, if you, for example, take Bejeweled from that argument, and then you kind of compare it with Tetris, then if Bejeweled is not a game, then how come you do sort of qualify Tetris as a game? Because it's both about arranging puzzle blocks. So it's interesting argument from then. Glad that we moved on from that argument also. So, all right. We know now what the casual gamer, non-gamer, women, what we like to play. So then the question is, who are we? What does a typical non-gamer look like? Demographically, it would be under the housewife stereotype. Which was like one of those marketing terms that, again, outdated. I'm not too thrilled with this stigma. Basically because people think of this. Well, I think it's more something like this. I'm like, fuck you, I'm the one doing laundry from now on because I'm fed up with you ruining my sweaters. Stereotypes aside, I think it comes down to a few genderless traits where it's more like people who sort of are more in control of the household are people with a long to-do list of small tasks. And because of that, there's a fragmented attention. So it's unpredictable how long and when and where gaming will take place. As a result of this, getting into console or PC games is just something that doesn't really fit that much in the daily schedule quite often. And because these people are then like, oh, I don't have a console, I'm not a gamer, sort of identify those two things as one and one. And these people, because they don't often openly talk about their gaming because they don't see themselves as a gamer. And it's not often that you, for example, hear a mother or a grandma say like, "Oh, this weekend I'm going to do nothing besides just lay on the couch and play Gardenscapes all weekend long." Yeah, they might, but it's not something that they sort of openly, proudly sort of confess. Okay, so if it's then, if it's not by stereotype of people, then how else can you sort of identify a casual game versus a hardcore game? So easy to learn, hard to master is something that's long been used to describe casual games. But I don't think it's very applicable to only casual games anymore. Because what about Minecraft? From an angle of engagement and depth and fan following, community, addiction even, this could really easily be associated as a hardcore game. But yet for many kids, it was sort of their first contact with working on a PC because it was so accessible. It didn't really need a tutorial. It was a very forgiving sandbox environment. So from that perspective, it's quite casual. So that's one example from that side. On the other side, you might think like, well, surely there are no casual games out there that are hard to master. Well, I think there are. These are screenshots from Love Nikki. I think it has the most complicated user interface I've ever seen on a mobile game. And it's not only that, it's packed with battles and quests and side quests and competition. There's a clan system, there's leaderboards, and there's it's a really sort of engaging, hardcore environment, basically. Except that it's about fashion. Okay, so then if it's not about the whole easy-to-learn, tutorial, hard-to-master thing, maybe then it's about how a game makes you feel. Maybe that's the differentiator between hardcore and casual. But please look up the interesting TED Talk from my friend Bree Code. She did a great job explaining the role of the hormone oxytocin. Very short version of it. There's adrenaline, which makes you trigger that fight or flight response. And there's oxytocin as sort of the counterpart, which triggers a tend or befriend response. And Bree has a wonderful story in her talk of where she recommended Skyrim to a friend who was not interested in gaming at all. And then a couple weeks later, she got a phone call from this friend in tears because Lydia died. So to this friend, the connection with this in-game character was the most interesting thing about Skyrim. So, from that point of view, it's where we regard Skyrim as a really hardcore game, yet it has a very soft side to it. And then, of course, there's the other example from the casual industry. This is Bejeweled Blitz, sort of the online PvP mode. And I think this is on the other side. Bejeweled is regarded as a casual game. Yet this is very hardcore. It's very action-packed. It's 60 seconds. So all your actions, you have to do it in 60 seconds, which kind of triggers that adrenaline. It's very competitive actually. It's worldwide. There's also competitions being organized to this. So then this is where it becomes hardcore, I think. And not even to speak of this game. Mensch age dich nichts. Sorry for butchering your language. Let's call it Ludo, because that's easier for me to pronounce. This is regarded as a nice little family game, but how many times were tables flipped and did people cry because they were just shoved off the board by grandpa coming on with his pawn? This is really hardcore PvP, right? And yet we consider it a casual game. Okay. Okay. So if it's not about how a game makes you feel, then maybe it's about how much time you invest. No. That's not. I mean, this is hardcore. So yeah. Okay. Time is also not a good differentiator. So okay. We're halfway through the talk. We've gotten nowhere. We've gone all over the place. So let me try to get back to the point. Casual and hardcore. I want to kind of go back and map it out as a tree. In the beginning, when it was casual, right? Okay, easy to learn. That genre grew a little bit, where games were still sort of very easy to learn, but it got it got a story behind it, and it definitely got more game mechanics. It could easily suck up way more time, but let's still sort of keep it in the middle between casual and hardcore. Then. So then there's like a more of a split happening, where games are becoming sort of more evolve into this hardcore genre, and there's more and more coming out, and it kind of saturates the market. Casual, as we said, kind of starts to sort of gain more market share there again. Casual becomes more and more complicated in its own as well, where The Sims, I think. It's hardly something that you sort of get into in 5 minutes. There's definitely a lot more depth to it. And now we've gotten to that point where I think there's no more clear distinction between what is casual and what is hardcore. And not even talking about hyper-casual yet, where it is basically a very casual 5-second game experience, yet people sink days into it. So is it casual or is it hardcore? So this tree now basically covers anyone who has ever touched a digital game in their life. And yeah, I'll get there. So I think that's also my point of the talk. Right now we are entering this era where everyone has touched a digital game in their life at some point. So there are like no more non-gamers. It's with generations, this will fade out. So my point is that games cannot be categorized as hardcore games or casual games anymore, but it's the way we enjoy them. So for example, I know a story of a friend's kid, and he was just playing GTA, but not in the way that you're sort of supposed to play it. But this kid was basically only just stealing all the cars he could find and color-coordinated parking them in a parking lot. That's all he did, which I think is brilliant. So that's a casual way of enjoying it, right? And at the same time, Clash Royale is now an official esports game. And when this game first came out, I thought like, oh, they're doing something more casual now. Think again. So yes, the point. I think we should categorize hardcore and casual more as play styles and how we want to enjoy the content, and not so much as the content itself. I hear a lot of game pitches in my work as a publisher, and the game pitch can typically be something like, we're working on a hardcore turn-based PvP game in a fantasy setting. Like, how does the word hardcore add value to your pitch at some point? You could just say that it is a turn-based PvP game in a fantasy strategy, and how the people will enjoy it, if they will enjoy it casually or hardcore, that's up to them. You're just like providing a nice experience, and then the magic of it is how your players are going to enjoy your content. So with that, thank you so much for listening. My name is Martine Spaans, and I am not afraid to admit that the most wonderful thing about Gran Turismo is the car editor, where I just spent hours and hours making my dream car. Thank you.
Martine, thank you so much. That was very exciting. And I think we do have time for a very quick question, so if we got one. If not, we can do it later on in the networking session, but you'll get a microphone in just a bit. Right here in the second row, the gentleman in the black jacket.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
This is a very interesting presentation about this gamer hardcore things. One interesting thing about games is the only media that exist the word gamer. There not exist the word movier or graphic noveler and one interesting thing is about identity. It's about create group relations. So when I don't want to identify my mother as a hardcore gamer, is because I don't want my mother in the same group of gamers as me. What do you think about this identity side of hardcore, casual, gamer, and how these relations between creating groups around and friendship groups around it also?
It's funny that you mentioned this because a few weeks ago I had like the same discussion with friends. Like we don't say music listener or we don't say movie goer. But then again, I was saying, well, we don't say music listener, but we do. There are people who say like, oh, I'm really into music, like it's my life. And there are people who just turn on the radio and listen to music. But you know, what do you call those people? It's not. There's nothing like specific to the medium to describe this group of people because it's just considered very normal behavior. It's not like it's not like saying, "Oh, I'm a sleeper," because I sleep every night. And I think, well, maybe it's also what I hope, but I also think that we are going to this point, with maybe the next generation or something, where gaming is just such a normal thing to do, just like watching TV or going to the movies, that we don't need to label it as such.
All right. Thank you so much. Oh, another question? Do we have one? No? We good? Martine, thank you so much for this interesting presentation. And